Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today we're going to be talking with Daryl Dittmer. How's it going today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you? Thanks for having
Good.
me.
Awesome. I'm excited. Couple of reasons. Tomorrow is my birthday and I will be 2 years alcohol free.
Awesome.
Yes.
Congratulations.
So it's going to be a great conversation. And um, the other thing is you're from Michigan and my wife's family's from Michigan. And
There we go.
I visited there for the first time, I think 2 or 3 summers ago, and absolutely loved it. I had, it's kind of, there's a few unassuming places I've been, maybe like Kansas and Michigan, that you're like, man, it's flat. What do they got to offer? And you get there and you're like, it's actually pretty cool. The weather's nice. There's a lot of outdoor. It's beautiful. Some of the towns have that old feel. And I, as I've gotten older, I enjoy the slower pace of things.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. It hurts less.
Yes. Yeah. Because I just made this, it's interesting because I came up with this analogy on a solo episode of, you know, I grew up in the country and in the 80s and 90s, I went to a little 2A school. And, there was this thing where living rural and being in a small town, small schools often equaled less education because you have less funding, et cetera, et cetera. And then
Mm,
people who are pro education and whatnot tend to move towards the cities where there's opportunity and whatnot and that hustle and bustle. But now we live in such a place that you don't have to be in New York or LA to be an actor or a comedian or a musician. Um, and so, kind of the same thing. Um, I lost my train of thought, kind of. Fudge. Um, anyway, yeah, it had something to do with, oh, yeah. So now we're in this place, and now that you don't have to be in those places for opportunity because we can do anything from anywhere with technology, now it's like I can move away from the hustle and bustle of opportunity, quote unquote, and actually relax my mind and body on 12 acres in a small, slow paced town. And I enjoy it. And, we're in this place that now smaller town relaxation doesn't have to mean less opportunity or less education. And I kind
right.
of dig that. So,
Right. Yeah. I hail from, I was born in Detroit,
uh huh.
but when I was early, like, first becoming a teenager, I guess, we moved out to the country in Michigan. And it was a very cool thing. It was nice to be in the country. It was nice to be in a place where everybody waves when you're going down the
Yeah.
street, or you can strike up a conversation at a gas station, pumping gas in your car, and talk to somebody for 10 minutes, and just everybody knows everybody, which is kind of cool.
When you're
I
younger, it
enjoyed that
doesn't seem
immensely.
as cool. But I think when you're older and like having children and whatnot, it's actually a value add,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I had well, my story, I can break into a little bit if you want,
Yeah, let's
Richard,
go for it.
in
Let's,
terms of, just from whence I came. It was it was an interesting upbringing. My dad was a mechanic. My mom took care of the kids in the house and all that sort of thing. It was pretty traditional, I would say,
yeah.
and very Midwestern, very, especially Michigan. I thought, and I was slightly mistaken, but probably not by much, that everybody's dad worked for either GM, Ford, or Chrysler, which was kind
Oh,
of what, it was. My dad was a GM guy, and he was pretty tough. He was a military veteran, and just kind of a tough dude. But my mom was also tough. So So there was that as far as the upbringing, and I would say the expectations were high, and I think they were higher for me to an extent because I got involved in sports. My dad loved sports. My mom demanded good grades. My dad wanted me to be good at sports and that sort of thing. And so
Do you have any siblings?
I did an older
Okay.
brother and a younger sister.
Okay.
But neither of them were really very interested in the whole sports thing. Um, and I don't remember how they did in terms of
And so
grades. I
that's
did pretty
interesting
good when I
because
was
see,
young, but
I'm an only child, and so I find that interesting, like how sibling when there's two or three, and how some of them are similar, how some of them are different. And it seems in your case, like maybe your parents too, like wow, you're the one that has the qualities maybe that the other two didn't have, that maybe each of them had a little bit of in themselves, you know?
yeah, and it's interesting because we are extremely different. The three of us are very different. And I'm sure there's some things that are, just part of our being, I suppose, that are similar as well. And from the perspective of nurture, right? And
Hmm.
maybe some nature. But it's interesting how our lives have uh, not turned out even similarly to each other, which I think is just it's hilarious, it's interesting, it's all sorts of
Yeah,
different things. And there's no judgment of better or worse or anything like that. It's
just
just
different.
different, which is completely cool. So anyway, that's sort of the backdrop. I started my first drink was first real drink, I suppose, was around 13, which I think is pretty normal.
Now, did your siblings drink? Or where did you get the first drink? Because I can remember probably my first drink being around the same age. But it was like similar, and I think it was a family member who let me have a little bit of rum and coke.
Mm. This was actually it was rum and coke, interestingly enough, as far as I remember, but it was a friend of mine. And we were at this little gathering, this little party, a bunch of friends, and I thought it was the best thing ever. I really did. I was ready to go. I was ready to do it more. I was ready to do it again. I almost got my ass kicked by a older high school kid at the party because I was doing stupid things. But that didn't matter. It was just fun. I loved it, and I loved how I felt. For some reason, I felt unshackled. And I'm not sure why I felt shackled, but I felt unshackled.
Right.
And and I'm not big on sort of glorifying the demise sort of thing. So I'll suffice it to say that it progressed pretty quickly in terms of just the drinking and getting into different drugs and lying and cheating and stealing and trouble and but the worst part of it for me that I've discovered over the years was that I had this friction inside of myself where I was trying to please one side of the world that thought, oh, Daryl's got some capacity to do something reasonable with his life. And the other side, a bunch of clowns that I was hanging out with who were doing the same thing I was. And so I was trying to please both those sides and you can't please both. And that's where, I leaned over to the side of the friends and the trouble and all that sort of thing. And that just continued to get worse,
What were you
and
getting
definitely
from that?
worse inside of me,
What were
which
you getting from it that kept you in it? Because when you described the friction and you said two sides and you kind of have to choose. Well, obviously there's something you're obtaining from this, whether it's a validation, a friendship. I don't know what were you gaining from it.
I would say it was friendships and it was the quest. It was the quest to uh, you know, I feel like once a person is addicted,
Mhm.
that there's no stopping us. You know, that's the way we're going. And I can put, I can attach different meanings to it and that sort of thing, but I don't know that there was a reason other than that was where I felt accepted. That was where I felt nothing was wrong. That was where I felt like I'm not letting anybody down, because I was doing all the stuff that, and some of those friends started to drop off because they weren't hanging with the people who were doing it to real excess.
Right.
And they just weren't comfortable with it. So they would sort of fall off. And there were only a few of us left that did it that way. And so when I was 18, I was confronted with an intervention with my parents, and basically what they said, long story short, they said, "Look, go talk to this drug counselor, or just get out of our life." And I was like, "All right, well that sucks because I've been caught." And I was caught a long time ago, but it finally came to a head in terms of you got to do something about it, or not, or get out of here. And we're done. And so anyway, I after much deliberation, and they had said, if you're going to meet us at such and such a place, such and such a time, meet with this drug counselor. And so I was scared to death. I was 18. I was just a kid, and I did
Um what were you scared of? Because that's
myself.
kind of the hard part. Yeah, like some people it's like, when you're caught up in it, you you want to quit. There's nothing you want more sometimes, but maybe it's the familiarity of it, the unknown that makes it scary because you feel kind of normal once you ingest it. Um, yeah, so were you more scared of, were you scared of like something internally, what you were feeling, or more scared of being rejected by your family?
I think I was most scared of being rejected. I was most scared of, and sometimes you don't know that these things are going on inside. I mean, I was 18. I had zero insight. I
Right.
had zero ability to understand like I do, a long time later.
Mm-hmm.
But the worst thing, and one of the worst feelings, I think, for me along the whole ride was having to hide, feeling like I was having to hide. And so I decided to go talk to this drug counselor, but I also thought, I'm just going to lie. I'm just going to, whatever I got to do to try to get out of it, right? Because that's what I had done for so long, relatively speaking, in terms of my life, and just lie, cheat, and steal. So that's what I was used to doing. I walked into the drug counselor. He's like, dude, you can't lie to me. Don't even try. I'm going to call you out on it and boot you out of here, and you're going to be in the same place you were before you came in. And he intimidated me. I remember being intimidated. I was like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
like this guy just slapped me right in the face, and like just made me stop. And so whatever I said to him, and I don't remember anything about that, but I remember that I was as honest as I could be at the time with another human being,
Right.
which was a far cry from what I'd been to everyone else, prior to that time. So at the end, I do remember saying, "What do you think, Doc?" And he said, "Well, I think we got to put you into treatment." And I was supposed to go to a place in Minnesota. I think they call it Twin Towns,
Mm-hmm.
60-day inpatient program, but they were full, and they were full for a little bit. So I got put into a place in a hospital program in Detroit, and that's where I spent 30 days in treatment.
Um, what when you made that decision and you finally got the ball rolling, um, because I want to encourage people who need help. What Was there a sense of relief? You had some nervousness, but once the ball got rolling, was there a sense of relief? And during that 30 days, kind of where did it shift for you and going, okay, I was trying to lie myself out of this. Okay, I got a problem. Okay, I'm going to tackle this head on. Where in that 30 days, about how long does that take?
I bought a big bag of dope before I went in, and thinking, okay, I'll have this ready when I get out. And anyway, so going into treatment, I was petrified,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there was a little grain of something that, a little grain of hope. I think there was just a little grain of hope that maybe things could be different. Maybe I didn't have to be miserable. Maybe someday I could look people in the eye. Maybe someday I could have a real conversation. Maybe someday I could have some confidence. And that unfolded as treatment went on, and that little grain of hope grew a little bit and continued to grow over that 30 days. And that was because for me, and I was introduced to the 12 steps back then, and they had us go to meetings and all that sort of thing, and they had meetings in the treatment center, and I saw people who were like laughing and joking and enjoying themselves and were sober. And there were a couple of counselors in there who had been sober, and one guy was, a little older than me, maybe 10, 15 years older than me, but old enough so I could still relate to him.
Yeah.
And he was living a life that he seemed to be happy with. And to me, growing up the way I grew up working on farms and that sort of thing. And it was really the Protestant work ethic thing. I was thrown into it early.
It's not
And I
about
saw
enjoyment,
somebody
it's
who,
about it. It's about you do the work.
right, right. Well, I saw somebody who was a drug counselor, and I was kind of like, wow, I didn't know people did this sort of
Yeah.
stuff. Like that's high end compared to, the background that I was used to. And so that hope grew over time. And what I like to say is, out of that 30 days, two things really started to bloom inside of me. One was that hope grew enough to think, wow, I can do this in real life. And the second one was, I was introduced to the 12 steps, and I had a place to go. I had a place to go. And that was really important for me, because I had remembered back, one of our friends had gone through treatment, and he went through a treatment for a few months. And 10 minutes after he got out, he was with us partying.
Mm.
And so that was my introduction to anything having to do with drug treatment, that, well, that doesn't work, right? Like, this cat didn't
Yeah.
get anything out of it. And I did. I got that hope, and I got the 12 steps, and that's where I started my life.
Yeah.
Once I got rid of that stuff, life started.
How was the detox part of it?
I wrote about it a little bit in the front of my book. It sucked. It was difficult. There was a day that I don't know what the time frame was, but that I literally felt like I was getting pulled into hell by an evil entity. And it was the freakiest thing. It was the freakiest thing. And like, I was getting physically pulled down,
Mm-hmm.
and then I woke up or came to, or whatever it was, and I was hanging off the bed toward the floor, like I was literally getting pulled down
Wow.
somewhere. And that was just the freakiest thing. But yeah, it sucked. It was,
It's yeah, it's almost like I don't know. I describe like sometimes being in like a military evolution of exercise or something that you feel like, when is it going to end, if
mm,
ever? And that's, you're just like, please end, please end, please end. But once you finished up this 30 days of treatment, what does your life look like from there? You get out of treatment, do you get some gainful employment, do meetings, and kind of how does your life start to unfold, like leading up to where you decide you want to write a book and start helping others achieve and succeed the way you have?
It was always um, it was always important to our family and our, just the way of life that we had, that you always had a job. You always had, you always had to make your own money, that sort of thing. I remember when I was 15, I started working on a farm when I was 14. And I said to my dad one day, because I had tennis shoes, sneakers that I was
Yeah.
working on this farm with. I didn't have any work boots, and I was wrapping them up with duct tape, trying to keep the cow and pig manure out.
Mm.
And I said to my dad one day, hey, can I get some work boots? And he's like, yeah, you're working. Go get yourself some work boots. I'm like, okay, thanks. But that was it. That was the ethic that I was brought up with. And I don't remember exactly what job I got. I think I went to back to work on a farm when I got out of treatment. But the other thing that I wanted to do was I decided that I wanted to. And nobody in my family had ever graduated from college. I decided I
Uh-huh.
wanted to go to college, and that was just kind of this ancillary discussion that my family would have every once in a while, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if, blah blah blah, you went to college. And I decided I wanted to do that because I started to want to experience life, and I started meeting people who were experiencing life in a cool way, that were doing things that I didn't know were possible. They were making money, and they were doing things that were useful, and to themselves and others, and giving back and all these kinds of things. And I had to learn about all this stuff because I was young, and so the 12 steps helped me. I like to say this, and I say it fairly frequently, that there's only one step that deals with the actual addiction. The
Hmm.
rest of it is about life. The rest of it is learning to live. And because I started to understand that I didn't have a clue, I listened. And I had gotten to the point where I knew I didn't know it all. And that was a wonderful place to be, to start embarking upon a different way of living and doing things differently.
Yeah, it made me think, like, I feel like as I've aged and evolved, like you learn this, I think if you can maintain kind of like a mystical curiosity, then, it's like you you don't have to be this way or that way. And the way you are and who you are can evolve and change as the world changes. But if you're open enough to look at everybody else, how they're experiencing life, what are they doing that they get that much joy? And then sometimes it's in the daily, in the small things, the enjoyment of, you know when typically when people sober up, they have to replace the time they spent drinking with something. And oftentimes it's something positive, which is a great thing, be it education, exercise, or anything like that. But yeah, um, that is that is interesting. Um, so you're out there, you're you're going, you decide you want to go to school. Now, what did you go to school for? And was helping others conquer the problem that you had gotten yourself through, was this on your radar yet to start solving or pursuing as a passion?
It was not at that point. And I caution people about this all the time. Don't save the world until you've saved yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's crucially important, because it's very easy to get, um, one of the hallmarks and keystones of getting ourselves together. At least this was what it was for me, and I've seen it, with a lot of people over the years. Is I have to be honest with myself, and I have to take care of me. And you talked about, certain things that we would do whether it's exercise or school or whatever, we're replacing those activities. But I learned that I have to pay attention to treating my body right, my heart right, my mind right, my soul right. And I have to do all of those things. And you'd mentioned curiosity, and I'm a huge fan of exploring what's out there, exploring what there is to, what have people done before me that's that's the coolest thing ever, in terms of what they believe or what they do or their activities or how they approach life and that sort of thing. And I started to explore those things. I started to explore. I grew up Lutheran, and
Right.
so I had this Protestant, thing, and I'm scared of going to hell and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, oh man, this sucks. This is too much pressure. I
Yeah.
don't. It's too much pressure to have
It's
to
very
adhere.
restrictive. Yeah, it's
What's
very
that?
restrictive.
Very. I have to stay in this little bubble of what they say, or I'm going to be, sitting in fire for eternity.
Yeah,
That
and
was kind of.
and you're already ostracized semi. I mean, growing up in a small religious town, it's interesting. It's a small Baptist town. There was like growing up one Catholic church, but the health systems were Catholic. And so it's interesting how all these pockets but I think now, I'm 48, going to be 49 tomorrow, and it's this you I think you see the intent of maybe religion and this and that the other, but as 40 something years have passed by, you see that they overlap more than they actually divide. But during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it felt more divisive, you know?
Yeah, it was. There's a couple things, and I have nothing against what anybody believes. The only
Right.
thing I say is, just make sure it's working for you.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you believe, and that's the key. But and for many people, religion works
Yeah.
for whatever period of life they're in, and et cetera, and that's completely cool. So I have nothing against religion, but there's a story that one of my favorite authors is Joseph Campbell, and he talked about a Hindu youth that came to America, and he was college age, I guess, and he wanted to learn about the West, and so he read the Bible,
Mm.
and he got done reading the Bible, and he went back to Joseph Campbell and said, it's interesting. I read the entire Bible and I didn't find any religion in it. And I think that's a really cool thing that we can look at things with an expanded view, and we can look at the same thing that everybody else looks at, but look at it differently and look at it from a different perspective and look at it from a non-restrictive view.
Yeah, it's a
And
set of stories.
right, exactly. And it's stories, there's historical things, but there's a lot of life training
Yeah,
in
parables
in
and
in those books, and metaphorical stuff, and just
mhm.
and some really beautiful writing. And anyway, I could go
That
on
is
and on
wild.
about.
Like I've never I feel like I've heard it before, but this is the first time that when you said I didn't see any religion in there, it's like, huh. But people live and die on that.
They do, and they fight wars about it.
That's
And
wild.
and I was Lutheran, and I was in the Wisconsin Synod,
Uh-huh.
whatever it was, sect or whatever, of Lutheranism. And there's a Missouri Synod, right,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, around the Midwest too. And they're like, no, 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 no. What those guys believe isn't right. It's not cool. It's not the right thing. And I'm thinking, as I get older, I'm like, really? Like you guys can both be Lutherans,
Yeah, well,
but you can't agree on what a Lutheran is?
I think the older you get, you realize it's like, look, I'm human, you're human. We're both
Yeah.
broken. We both suffer from the same afflictions. Um, so maybe both of us are right, maybe neither one of us is right. But let's join together and create some sort of kind of cohesiveness and help each other out because
Yeah,
we're all we've got, like humankind, humanity, man to man. Um, I think of it as, in a capitalist society where we exchange money for time, money for products, and everything. It's this different concept of maybe like when my grandparents and great grandparents who lived through the Great Depression, where you had a skill, you had a service, but you traded. I might trade you my services to fix your cart and wagon for some vegetables to feed my family.
right,
But it kind of goes to this concept of what I think of, everyone has a value. Nobody is more than, nobody is less than. We all have a role in the world. We all have gifts and skills. And it's about figuring out which ones are yours and then figuring out how you can use those to contribute to a better world in the bigger picture. Because whether I don't know shit about cars. I can't fix cars, but I have a master's degree in healthcare. I can tell you about some healthcare shit, but it's not about, am I
right,
better than the mechanic? Fuck no.
right,
It's like we need both. I need you when my car doesn't work, and you need me when you're picking an insurance plan.
right, right.
Let's help each other out.
I couldn't agree more. And even the intangible things and how we operate internally and helping somebody when they're struggling
Mm-hmm.
or and this is why I say it's so important to get ourselves right before we try to take on the unimaginable role of saving the world, is because can I forget about myself? And these are the little things that I think of, and I've thought about for a long time. Can I forget about myself and what I think I need and all of my pains and all of my stuff long enough to give a smile away walking down the sidewalk, or be extra nice to this person who looks like they might not be having a good day, or smile at the cashier, or strike up a conversation with somebody and make their day. Or
Yeah.
I was at physical therapy yesterday for a little hip issue I have, and there was this guy there. He had to be 90 years old, and I sat down next to him, and he had this hickory stick that he used for a cane, and he put the little 4 feet on the
Yeah.
rubber feet on the end of it, and he had rope tied around it for a grip. And I just started talking to him, and he and I were talking for 10, 15 minutes about nothing. And but that's how we are good to people. That's how we don't, we can't close ourselves off from everybody.
That's my favorite, is sharing moments with strangers. If I'm Ubering, waiting for an order, and you're talking to another driver, or man, there's just sometimes that, to me, that's what life is about, and that's
Beautiful.
where you understand, like, we're not that different.
Right.
Why are we fighting and arguing? But
Right.
when so what did you study in college, and how was the college experience for you? Because I would say a lot of people might experiment with alcohol and drugs before they go to college, but I don't, and a lot while they're in college. But you had already kind of had yours, wrapped it up, and went to college. So I imagine your college experience was a little different. What did you study, and how was that?
It was uh it was interesting. I was about 8 months sober when I went. Um and it was difficult. It was really difficult because I had to study. I had a job milking cows from 3 to 9 in the morning, 2 or 3 days
Ooh,
a week because I needed money. Um I had I was actually played basketball. It was a small school in Michigan. It's a long story. I'd got some letters from universities, but I ignored them all because I was too busy with the drugs thing. So I called a local school. I said, "Hey, can I play basketball for you?" They're like, "Come on down." So I was playing basketball, and all of these things were just like too much. It was too much for me, and I took on too much too early. I studied criminal justice because my brother was a cop. My grandfather on one side was a cop. My grandfather on the other side was a firefighter. And so that was sort of from whence my family came. And I didn't know anything about business or marketing or finance or, people are like, oh, I'm getting a marketing degree. I'm like, what is marketing? I had no idea. I didn't even know the difference between wholesale and retail when I got out of college, which is hilarious, but it's true. Um, but anyway, so that's what I studied, and I I struggled. I after my freshman year, I had to take the next year off because I was losing my mind, and it was I took on enough to just drive myself crazy, and so I had to take that year off, and everybody thought, oh, he's not going back, but I went back the following year, and then finished out my college career, and it was a great experience. I One of the things I talk about in my book is I liken college to a dog park.
Yeah.
It's like an off-leash dog park. So
Hmm.
everybody's just, you know, some are fighting, some are having fun, some are,
The value
running
is in
around
the
the fields.
discussion and the people around you. There's this, especially now, there's a big debate on is college valuable or not. College taught me what I can do, what I'm capable of. It shows other people that he's willing to put forth 6 years of effort and all the shit that goes with it.
Right.
But it's not about that. You can learn facts from books, computers, shit anywhere. It's about the discussion and the people and the ideas, the bigger picture.
Yeah, one of the things I like to say is, and because they talk about, when you get a puppy or something, get them socialized, right,
Hmm.
along with other dogs and this and that, and that was one of the things that college did for me. It helped socialize me. It helped take off some of those rough edges
Yeah.
that I had, and I don't want them all off. I still have some of them, and I love them. It's completely cool with me. But yeah, the socialization was a huge aspect of it for me.
So what did you end up doing career wise when you so you're milking cows, you got a degree, and what do you end up doing during this time? Because I want to get what are you doing and what leads into you deciding to be an author and write the books that I see behind you on the shelf.
So when I got out of college, I went to be a carpenter because the year that I took off, I started doing framing with this
Mhm.
guy, and so I was a framer for a little bit, and then somebody asked me to get involved in sales. And I had no idea what sales
You
was,
said
but I was like,
wholesale or retail?
yeah, I had to learn that part. It's so true. It's so ridiculous, but it's true. It was very enlightening, and then somebody from that job said, "Hey, you want to get involved with me in this other sales thing?" I was like, "Okay." And then not too long later, somebody said, "Hey, you want to move out to Boston with us? We're starting this company to help people with stress management, weight control, um, and smoking cessation." And
Oh, that
I'm
sounds
like, "Well, I
interesting.
guess I better quit smoking before I help try to tell people." So anyway, I quit smoking, but I could always go back and forth between smoking and chewing
Yeah,
because I was nicotine addicted for sure. Anyway,
I
so
am.
I got involved in that, and during that business, everybody that went, there were several of us that went from Michigan to Boston. The joke is, and it is a joke, so hopefully nobody takes it too seriously, but was that people in Boston were too stressed out to do anything about their stress. So everybody went back to Michigan except me. I was like, you know what, new adventure, I'm in. I love the ocean. I love, the mountains are close, all that
Yeah.
stuff, and it was a cool place. So I stayed and I got involved in a different business. And in between, I had to do some odd jobs, some carpentry, building things, whatever. But I got involved in the risk management business, the financial end of risk management. Anyway, it's what I ended up doing for 20 some years. And
What
I
is that
still
like?
do.
Is that like bank stuff? Like you're assessing whether or not somebody could get a loan or not, depending on how much they have, their investments, their assets, and blah blah blah, or what?
It was a lot of it had to do with the commercial insurance property and casualty business.
Okay.
And I got to where I was, structuring these financial deals. They weren't really insurance deals. They were, deals with $500,000 deductibles, that kind of thing. So that's sort of what I morphed into with that business. And I still do a couple of consulting gigs now, but every step along that journey, as far as me professionally, was incredibly useful to help me grow as a person. And since I didn't grow up, with much money in terms of the family and that sort of thing, and I wanted to make some money. I really did. I wanted to experience some things in life that had to do with money, and I wanted to not have money stop me from
Right.
doing things that I wanted to do. That was probably the biggest thing. And so, I was fortunate to have achieved that, but I also, along the way, and I think this is a really important thing, for anybody who's listening, and it's great to put in the effort and it's great to do the work and all that sort of stuff. And I'm a big proponent of that, but we have to put in work in all areas of our life. Because if all we focus on is money, that might be what we get, but there's a real good chance we're going to be miserable if that's all we get.
Yeah.
So success to me, and this has been this way for a long, long time, is success to me became, along the journey, waking up in the morning with a smile on my face. If I wake up in the morning with a smile on my face, I'm successful. And a lot goes into that equation to be able to wake up in the morning with a smile on my face. But that's what success started to mean to me. And it's somewhere along the journey, and I've tried to help people all the way, but not so formally to where I got to when I wrote the book. I needed to get the story out because I finally felt like I had something to give back.
Right.
And that was the catalyst for me writing my books.
Let me ask you a question. What hmm, what what did you get out of, what did you enjoy about the job, the risk management? You know, I assume it wasn't something like you intended to do that because you studied criminal justice. So you fell into that. And sometimes we do fall into things and stick with it for 20 years. When I did healthcare, it was like 15 years of it. I was like, it kind of chose me.
Right.
But what did you gain from it that was useful and beneficial? Because, I want to paint a picture for people who might be in this situation of they're not doing exactly what they want, or maybe that's not even important. They think they want to be doing something, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is what's within themselves. And so you kind of fixed yourself, which means kind of almost no matter what you pursue, you can find a level of enjoyment in it. The thing itself doesn't have to be the enjoyment.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's an old quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln: "Whatever you are, be a good one."
Yes,
And I
100%.
and I think that's I have that hanging up actually, and I look at it all the time. And for me, it was continued challenging of myself, continue stepping into things that I'm uncomfortable doing, continue stepping into things where I'm scared. Um, and so that was really the value of my occupation, because I could have there were people who stayed at a certain level in terms of the sales, and they sold, let's just say $1,000 products, and
Right,
it's not difficult to sell those. And then there's 2,000 and 10,000 and 20,000 and a million and 5 million and 10 million. And I kept leveling up what I was getting good at.
right,
And so that was really important to me to continue to challenge myself. And through that experience, I learned that, I don't, there's many places in life that I can challenge myself. And a lot of times, it's not the external thing that I'm doing, it's the internal stuff. And that's where I can challenge myself and really see dividends from the perspective of peace of mind and contentment and even something as simple as meditating, and learning how to meditate or learning how to do breath work, things that I don't want to do
Yeah,
because it's not easy to sit still. It's
it's
not
not.
easy to do nothing. It's, like for me, that was a real challenge. But so taking on challenges, I think, is what I learned from my professional experience, and now I love it. Even though if I'm scared to death, I still love it.
You know
And
what's
and
interesting was I just thought of that. Like, you know, it's good to take on challenges that maybe you hate and don't want to do. Because guess what? Life is gonna, somebody's gonna pass away in your family. And you're not gonna have any fucking clue how to make funeral arrangements, everything that has to be done when somebody dies. It's a shit ton.
right,
You're gonna have to figure it out. And and life is that way. So I think that's the thing is if you can embrace the challenge in your ability to get through it and conquer it, that's where the fulfillment lies. Because I used to always say, like, working Chili's on a Saturday night in Boca Raton, Florida. When you work the meat grill, you're doing fajitas, you're doing this, you're doing that, everything. It's the busiest station. You know you're going to get kicked in the nuts. How do you prepare for a kick in the nuts? You don't. But if you have the right people around you, the right mindset, and the right I can do, it makes it hurt a little less. Or at least makes
absolutely.
it feel like, hey, I did that. I took that kick like a champ and I can walk
Right.
away from it. And there's something to that, even when it's gonna suck and it's gonna hurt.
There has to be an understanding, I think, and I think it's important for young people and people if you're just getting clean or sober or whatever it is, it's really important to understand that life is absolutely going to kick you in the balls and many, many times. And we can get to a point, we don't necessarily have to embrace it. We don't necessarily have to like it, but we do need to understand that is a part of life because I think today it's a little different in terms of, just overall. I think life is geared to make things easy, to make things convenient. That's what all the companies are selling us. We're going to make this easy for you. We're going to make it convenient. We're
Well,
going to make it
Lean Six Sigma, everything's about what it simplifying, less
right.
error, streamline, fastest, quickest, cheapest, or most
Make it
efficient.
make it not hurt, right? Like
Yeah.
all of the things are geared toward wrapping us in cotton balls. And but life isn't about getting wrapped in cotton balls and you're going to get your teeth kicked in. I mean that figuratively, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes literally, but that's what's going to happen. And life is going to hand us that stuff. And it's not that we can prepare for it, but we can strengthen ourselves over the course of time. And we can have that, armor may be too strong of a word, but we can have that resilience and we can have that ability to get up when we get knocked down. And that has to be developed. And that doesn't develop if all we're worried about is our comfort. We need to step into things that are difficult, learn that we can go through them, and then something more difficult and learn that we can go through it. And I believe life hands us exactly what we need. I truly believe that because I've watched it happen in my own life. And the question is, am I learning? You
When you
know,
just said that, that's interesting. So let's say you have an alcoholic or an addict or something, life hands you what you need. What did they need from that experience?
people say to me all the time, um, what would you change in your life if you look back, from the beginning of your life to now? And I say, absolutely nothing. I wouldn't change a thing. But to answer the question, I personally believe that, and I've talked to tons of employers and tons of people who employ people who have, are recovering and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And they say, there's nobody I would rather hire than somebody who's recovering and they're on a mission in this life. Because there's a resilience and there's a strength and there's and I've found there's just another gear when that energy is pointed in the right direction as opposed to the wrong direction. So I think that I feel very fortunate to have gone through what I went through at a young age because it taught me, and I think this is crucial, it taught me what I don't want from this
Hmm.
life. And so when somebody gets sober or clean or whatever that is, if they learn what they don't want with life from life, they can get on with what they do want from life. And I think that's a huge step up from people who flounder. A lot of people flounder their entire life,
Oh yeah, I
right?
know.
And
The scariest thing is, I worked level one trauma for a while, and chicken today, feathers tomorrow, and man, to me, that's the scariest thing. Is like it's like having a bank account that you don't know when it's going to hit zero. So
right.
everything you do literally needs to count. And I don't know if you watched the news lately, but the people passing away seem to be getting younger and younger.
Mm,
I'm going to be 49 tomorrow, and I'm seeing people 52, 55, 39 having a heart attack, 38,
yeah.
maybe drowning in a pool or something. Um, yeah, it's real. Even though we like to not think about it and separate ourselves from it and try to distance it. Um, and there's just something about the aging process and going through things that you understand that mortality.
Yeah. I mean, ju- just the pains I wake up with these
Yes,
days.
you wake up injured. I'm like, how do you go to sleep and you wake up injured? That's age.
Right. Right.
How did you get
Exactly.
so when did you decide to write the book, and how was that process? Like, I'm sure you had some nerves, or were you confident? You're like, no, I know I got the goods and I'm going to do this. But when did you decide to write it? How did that come about? And then did you write it? Did you write it with a ghostwriter? What was that process like?
So it was, I don't feel like I'm late in writing my book, but kind of. So my wife, I met my wife 21, 22 years ago. And at that point I was about 20 years clean and, moving on. And I would tell her stories. And she's a really normal person. Like she's not addicted,
Yeah,
like she's just a normal person,
my
whatever the
wife's
heck
the
that
same
is. But
way.
yeah. And
They don't
it's
know what it's
insane.
like. They don't know what it's like to have more than like three drinks because
Right.
you like just puts them out. I'm like, I
Right.
drink half of a fifth of whiskey and I'm ready to go.
Right. Right. And so I was relating to her stories of my youth and she's looking at me and she's like, I'm not seeing it. I don't see this guy who was doing these things. And I was like, well, I did. And, and I said, remind me to write a book someday. And so that was 20-ish years ago. And so finally, 18 years later, after I probably wrote 3 paragraphs in those 18 years. And for whatever reason, other things taking precedence, busy, whatever. COVID happened. We moved. We changed. We got rid of some business stuff that we owned and just said, you know what? Going to do things differently, which I think is very important to do from time to time in our lives, and
Yes.
just change it up. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to write a book. And I wrote my first book, When I Stopped Fighting: The Unexpected Joy of Getting My Head Out of My Ass.
I
That's
love
the
it.
title. That's the title of my first book. And And that book took me somewhere between 2 and 3 months to write. And it was just, and I have the personality, like we talked about earlier. I have the
Mhm.
personality. So I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, like, man, I just got to go write. And I'd start writing and I'd write, noon. My wife wouldn't see me. She'd be like, dude, where are you? I'm like, I'm up in the office. And, and she knew I was up there. I wasn't really lost, but
Yeah.
that's just how I tackle things.
Yeah, it's like me. It's like if I'm not in this office, I'm probably at the gym, on a walk, or Ubering. Like one of very few places, but it's always geared towards productivity of some sort.
Right. Right. Exactly. And so I wrote that book, and I'll tell you a quick story after, in terms of how the title came about. But um, within, so 2 to 3 months to write that one, and then the second book, I just kept going. I just kept writing. I was like, there's more. There's more in me. I gotta, get it out, move it through. And it wasn't difficult to write them. It just, for me, it wasn't because it was, I didn't have to think about it. It was just pouring out, and it was a very natural process. There were very few times and I don't know if there were any times when I'm sitting there like, I just don't know what to write. Like I don't even know what writer's block is because it just came out. But anyway, so my second book took another 2 to 3 months, and that one was written, and then I had to go through the process of um, the editing and the covers and all that sort of stuff. So that took a little bit, but the how the title came about when I stopped fighting. I had a sponsor. This was when I was in college. I was 9, 10 months sober, and growing up in an environment where I'm fighting everything.
Yeah.
I'm fighting because I don't want to. I'm fighting because, you got to move through the pain. I'm fighting because, if it doesn't fit, get a bigger hammer, like all that sort of, you just wrestle with life. And I learned to wrestle with life because I learned the harder you try, the better off you're going to be. And and I think there's some truth to that, but I also think there's some truth to where we have to allow life to happen as well, while we put in the work. So anyway, my sponsor was, and for anyone who's new to this, it's just basically a mentor to help me through it and help me through sobriety. And he said, as he's watching me wrestle with these problems, and I'm bringing all my stuff to him, like, can you help me? And he's like, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And I was like, oh, I gotcha. So, and it doesn't have to do with not trying. It doesn't have to do with not putting in the effort in life. It has to do with, I don't need to wrestle with me my entire life because I'm the one that stops me. I'm the one that keeps me from being happy and content and free. And and as long as I'm in that wrestling match with myself, I may not get where I want to be. And so that's why I titled the books the way I did. The second book is When You Stop Fighting, the Road You're On is Your Own Asphalt.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that.
Thank you. So that's how they came to be. And I feel like they're helping people out there.
Um, in general, what is kind of the context? Are they stories, personal stories? Is it or actionable steps?
Really, both. The first one is more of a memoir. It's more of here's my story,
Mhm.
which has to do with, the addiction, dysfunction, overcoming, learning, lessons. It's a lot of stories. It's really the stories that have made up my life to this point. And then that's probably the first 2/3, and then the last third is some of the things that have been important for me to learn, like willingness and honesty and doing the right things even when I don't feel like it, all those sorts of things. And the second book is really about asking ourselves the question, what do we truly want from this life? And I believe, as I've worked with a lot of people over the years, I believe we all want some form of happiness and contentment. We want great relationships. We want peace of mind. We want to feel like there's a meaning or a purpose, and we want some financial security.
Yeah.
And you can throw a whole bunch of things, move, shift a couple of those things around, but I think that's what we all want. So the question is, what are we doing to try to get there? I did drugs and alcohol, and then I did workaholism, and then I did, addiction to nicotine. I did a whole bunch
Yep.
of stuff. So, what am I doing to try to get there? And what are those things yielding for me? Because none of the things that I tried were yielding the result that I wanted. And so then it goes into how do we get those results and how do we find what resonates for us and what gives us that peace and contentment, what gives us that quiet, what gives us that meaning or purpose. And come to find out as we move through um, the journey is where all the answers are. It's not sometime at the end. It's not like, oh, you got to do all this stuff and someday you're going to go to heaven. You know, it's what am I doing now, and how is that resonating with where I want to be, and that's where we find the answers.
Yeah, I used to always think like, I don't know, from maybe being an only child, but from a very young age, I was, no matter what, you have to be happy with you. You could have everything, the best wife, kids, house, it could be all gone tomorrow. And you're going to
Right.
have to wake up and face you. And I've always understood that. Um, and that's why I guess maybe I would describe it as why I'm always wrestling with myself. You know, if it wasn't alcohol, then it's working. If it's not working, it's the gym. If it's not the gym, it's something else. But
Right.
everything is kind of an extreme thing. But that's too because I have confidence in my abilities of going, I'm pretty sure I can do most things. For me, it's about deciding what's worth it that I want to do. What am I
Right.
willing to invest the effort in? Um, During this process, I know, like for me, um, there's a core wound, probably why I would use in the first place. But did you have any issues with self worth, and how did you rebuild it along the journey?
Absolutely had issues with self-worth. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't look people in the eye. I couldn't hold a conversation for any period of time. I was nervous and I was scared and I was not secure in myself in any way. And to me, there's there's something in the 12 steps where they say, and I think this is one of the most familiar things about the 12 steps, but to thine own self be true. And I learned that, similar to what we talked about earlier, I have to save myself before I can go try to save other people. I have to deal with me. And how do I deal with me? And how do I gain that self-worth? I gain that self-worth by doing the things that I feel good about. I lost self-worth by doing things that didn't resonate inside me, by doing things that didn't align with being honest and being unselfish and those kinds of things. I was all about me. I was all about how I feel. I was all about what I want. And to gain self-worth, I had to find out what works for me in my life and face the bully, and face the things that I didn't want to face and start to have some wins and start to have some triumphs, even if it's little things, even if it's trying something that I'm scared to do, and finding out things like, oh, it wasn't that difficult once I did it.
Right.
you know. There's an old saying, I'm trying to recall it now, but oh, yeah, I do remember. So people would say, and this, happened a lot in my younger years, and sometimes religion can draw us into this way of thinking, but asking God for strength. People ask God for strength every day and say, please give me the strength, please give me the strength, please give me the strength. And my belief is that God says, you already have the strength. Go do it. Go try it. And and so I don't have to wait for that strength to come. I have it. And that's how we rebuild self-worth by starting that little seed of faith in doing things that make us feel good about us and make us feel good about where our life is headed.
So what you mentioned earlier, success, waking up with a smile on your face. Many things go into that. What are the few things that go in? What is your like a few of your daily non-negotiables that make it possible for you to wake up with a smile on your face?
So my daily non-negotiables are first thing is making my bed,
Mhm.
which is I think just a very simple thing that we can do so we don't start our life with a disheveled sort of
I make mine every morning.
look. Yeah. The
uh,
second thing is I have a breathing practice that I've been doing for years now, and it's because I think we are cut from a little different cloth as people who have been addicted or who have that
uh-huh.
sort of tendency. So we need to learn to quiet ourselves. I needed to learn how to quiet myself, and my breathing practice helps me quiet myself and get ready for the day. I also meditate, and that also helps me get ready for the day. And it's just to quiet my mind so that I can go into life with a quiet mind as opposed to a turbulent mind. And it's just a very simple sort of concept, but it's something that takes practice. I exercise every day, or at least 6 days a week,
Yeah.
and I say thank you. I don't pray in the typical, what people would deem praying. My praying has morphed to saying thank you. I appreciate it. Whatever is out there, universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it. Thank you for life. Thank you for my family. Thank you for all the beauty that surrounds me. Because I do believe if we can live life from a grateful perspective, everything can change at that point.
Today I was on a walk. I don't even know why I was looking down, but there was this small leaf fragment that looked almost like the shape of an ice cream cone, no bigger than the size of my fingernail. But the moment I looked down, the way it blew and spun around so perfectly on the ground, this little wind gust, and then just stopped perfect. So small. And I was like,
So cool.
just
Yeah.
why did I notice that? I don't know. I mean, but I mean, in my healing journey and getting to where I'm at, it's been a process and a lot of that, and you know, but
Being in the
trying to take
moment is,
notice of things like that, the nature.
yeah, in the moment, right, is crucial. And being here now and
Yeah.
even and I think about things and sometimes I do this at the end of my meditation. I'll just sit there and I do it outside and I will just be in the moment, feeling the breeze move across me and move across my skin and across my body or across my face. And it's like I am in that moment right then and feeling that. And it's like somebody's pulling a silk sheet over me. And it's just the coolest thing. And those are the little moments that make this whole thing worth it. It doesn't have to be, oh, I got this great car and this great
Yeah.
house and all this sort of stuff. It's those little moments of connecting with what's real, that
Oh, when
make
I was in
all
Michigan,
the
I'd go
difference.
sit on the patio. We were in this cabin on Black Lake. Just sit in the morning, everybody's asleep. The cool breeze, the water, nature. Oh man, it just relaxing.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily get that maybe as much in the city, although the city kind of has its own thing. If I think, I have an active mind. I almost need to listen to something to go to sleep. I would probably fare okay with horns and sirens and different things going on in the background. Would I imagine sitting on like a, a New York balcony somewhere, hearing cars and traffic? I could
Yeah.
probably deal with that, but I certainly prefer a little more isolation, a little more distance between neighbors, a little more freedom, feeling like I have space, and then I can enter crowded spaces when I want to. You know, did you
I'm with
guys?
you.
Did you ever get back to Michigan, or did you stay in Boston?
Uh, Actually, I was in Michigan for, we kind of break it down by 25-year increments, although it's not exactly that. 25-ish in Michigan, 25-ish in and around the Boston area, and now we live down in Georgia.
My business coach is from Uxbridge, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I was posting pictures of they go hiking and stuff, and I didn't realize Massachusetts had that kind of terrain. You know.
yeah. There's definitely country in Massachusetts. Once you get outside of the 495 belt, you can certainly hit some country, which is cool. And my favorite thing about Massachusetts was just the history around Boston and the revolution and all, sort of getting the country kicked off. When I first went out to Boston, I read the sign that said Boston established 1630. I'm like, whoa, 1630, that's
Yeah,
unheard of in Michigan, right?
it's hard to believe. Like, I mean, I had a grandfather who was born in either they couldn't tell 1898, 1901, but it's wild. I mean, he was my grandfather when I was probably like 10, much older. But it's hard for us, I think, to conceptualize. Probably like my 11-year-old daughter, even more so. But even me being born in the 70s, it's like I can remember and understand that things were older, and you could still see 50 relics, whether it be in buildings, cars, and whatnot, where you don't see as much of a trace of that now. But I do think one of my last roles was being a living caregiver for a 97-year-old veteran, and he grew up
Mm,
in the town where I'm from. And so being able to look back and understand how the town grew, and what it was like, and how the local grocery chain started, and that it was dirt roads, and they used to carry people's groceries home for them, for the women, because this one
mm,
grocery store, they still have people who bring your groceries out to the car for you,
mm.
sackers and cart pushers. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think a lot of people move through their day. They pay it no mind. They just look at the current landscape, and they forget, like, oh man, like, we have brick roads and these azalea districts that are super old where I'm from, and when you walk on those old roads, and you're like, wow, it's to really appreciate it, I think.
Took a lot to get here, right? Where we are
Yeah,
as a country, no doubt.
and it's humans, and you can appreciate, just like us being able to talk, the technology that is allowing this, and we can appreciate that because you understood what it was like before. Um, and
Before
I think,
email. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a generational type of thing. I'm a Gen X, and so I'm still on the cusp of, I know how to do things on downtime when the computers go
Yeah.
out.
I'm a Gen X too. I'm tucked right up against the boomers, but I'm not a boomer. I'm still a Gen X.
Well, that's awesome, because I think the Gen X people are, I think we're like a transition generation, and I think that we're taking the old and we're able to see 30 or 40 years of thoughts and beliefs, and where maybe we're right and wrong, and trying to correct and maybe take the new generations of going, that might be too far out there. Let's reel it in a little bit. But some of the old boomer beliefs and stuff like that, like we don't have the same necessity for life that we did. You know, we don't. I had kids much later. People had kids younger, but they needed the help on the farms, and they had more kids because they needed
Right.
the help on the farms. Um,
Right.
you know, me right now, I do this and I have freedom. And I'm like, if I want a regular job when my 11-year-old turns 18 and starts her own life, I can work a steady job then if I really need to. But it's like this
Yeah.
evolution of learning like better ways. And I feel like we're kind of in that generation of maybe bridging the gap or changing it
Yeah.
when it comes
Yeah.
to generational trauma and stuff, things that have been handed down.
I think there's a interesting, 'cause I would never, you talked to me 30 years ago, I never would have thought of writing a book. You talked to me 3 years ago, I never would have thought of being on podcasts or doing a podcast or
Yeah,
anything like that. There's
it wasn't
I,
an option when we were kids.
right, right, exactly. But the whole sort of, trying different things and because I do remember when I first started in sales that, if I wanted to call somebody and I'm on the road, I got to stop at a payphone. That was just what I
Yeah,
had to do. And that was part of it. And I remember email coming out. I'm like, come on, I want to talk to people, I don't want to just email them, but I'm like, oh, okay. You start to see the functionality and the efficiency and okay, this is a way to do things. Now I still believe that face to face is the best,
yeah.
way to touch and feel and understand and all that sort of thing. But, there's absolutely application for so many things that we do now that make things more efficient.
So, what do you have planned for the future?
A lot of traveling, which is
For pleasure or purpose?
the purpose of pleasure. Yes, for vacation. Um, we've been doing a lot, and we're still doing a lot. I like to say I'm as retired as I want to be at this
That's good.
point. So I still do a couple of consulting gigs, which I love. I enjoy the people that I do the work for. But I have another book that I've got probably 75% outlined. I'm doing my podcast.
Hmm.
And so future, we'll see what happens next. But I'm I feel like I'm getting pulled toward doing a little more formal, lessons and speaking and
Hmm.
and helping people and that sort of thing. So on this vacation, I'm going to finish outlining book three, and I'm going to put together some plans for some talks and things like that to help people out at treatment centers or whatever it may be.
That is awesome. You
Thank
sound
you.
like you're living the dream.
Life is truly, truly something I'm grateful for, and I could never have planned how my life went, and if I had planned it, I could never have moved it to the point where I feel like it is now, where it's just I really do love waking up every day and doing what I do, and
Man,
it's great.
I I love to hear that because that's one of the questions I always like to end with is what's something unexpected? And the fact that you said it's kind of encouraging people to take that leap, have some faith. Like you said, I don't need to wait for the strength to show up. I have it. And I think understanding that even just resonated with me, and changed kind of how I think about things a little bit. But
Cool.
I want people to be encouraged to go, if I can just trust and have faith, life can turn out so much better than I ever could have planned for myself. And that's kind of what you just said. And um, so, yeah, we'll end there. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much, Richard. Wonderful being with you today. Yeah, I really
Yes.
enjoyed our conversation.
Yes. Thank you for sharing your time with me. And I'll send you the emails and all that whenever it's going to come out.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, man. You have a good rest of your day.
You as well. Thanks.
Asteroid of fear.